Video title Julius Caesar. The guard who refused to die hook the marble floor of the Senate is slick. Not with rain, but with the warm, metallic tang of arterial spray. Gaius Julius Caesar, the man who brought the world to its knees, stares at the ceiling of the theater of Pompey. He is not looking at his assassins. He is looking at the ghost of his own ambition. 23 times the steel bit deep, 23 times the life leaked out of the man who dared to be a king in a city that worshipped the word republic. He reaches out a hand, his fingers stained crimson, gripping the toga of the man he trusted most. The look in his eyes isn't fear. It is a terrifying realization that the world he built is about to burn. How did a man who started as a bankrupt aristocrat turn the entire Roman civilization into his personal weapon? Section 1. The gambler's grace Rome in 60 BC is a powder keg. It smells of sewage, incense, and unchecked greed. The streets are a labyrinth of mud and blood where the powerful buy lives like cattle. Into this rot steps Gaius Julius Caesar. He is young, he is broke, and he is hunted. His creditors are circling like vultures. His political enemies are sharpening their tongues, and he has exactly 0 legions to call his own. Most men would flee. Caesar does something else. He bets the house. He forms an unholy alliance with the 2 most dangerous men in the city. Pompey the Great, the legendary soldier whose ego is as vast as his conquest, and Crassus, a man whose wealth is so immense he essentially owns the Roman fire department and uses it to extort entire city blocks. They call it the triumvirate. It is a marriage of convenience built on a foundation of pure malice. Caesar needs the money, Pompey needs the glory, and Crassus needs the influence. Together, they don't just participate in politics, they hijack the Republic. But Caesar is no puppet. While his partners squabble in the Senate, he secures the governorship of Gaul. To the Roman elite, Gaul is a death sentence, a wild, savage frontier of mud-caked warriors and impenetrable forests. To Caesar, it is the ultimate laboratory. For 8 years, he doesn't just fight, he butchers. He wipes out tribes with the cold efficiency of an accountant balancing a ledger. He writes his own history, sending back dispatches to Rome that read like epic poetry. He makes his name synonymous with victory, turning the Roman public into his personal cult of personality. Back in Rome, the Senate is terrified. They see the reports, they see the gold, they see the legions that don't answer to the state, but to the man. Pompey, sensing his own shadow being eclipsed by his former partner, turns. He aligns himself with the traditionalists, the men who hold the Republic dearer than their own lives. They issue an ultimatum: lay down your command and return to Rome alone, or be declared an enemy of the state. It is a death warrant wrapped in a legal mandate. Caesar sits in his tent on the banks of the Rubicon, a shallow, muddy river that serves as the legal boundary of Italy. To cross it with his army is an act of high treason. It is the end of the law. It is the beginning of a war that will redraw the map of the world. Caesar looks at his officers. The silence is deafening. He picks up a die, rolls it, and whispers the words that will echo for 2 millennia. He steps into the water, and the Republic dies behind him. Section 2. The die is cast, the Rubicon is crossed. The air in Italy turns cold as Caesar's legions march south. There is no resistance. His soldiers are not merely men. They are extensions of his will, forged in the fires of Gaul. They don't fight for Rome, they fight for Caesar. Pompey and the Senate flee like thieves in the night, abandoning the capital to the man they call a tyrant. They retreat to Greece, scrambling to assemble a desperate, ragtag coalition to stop the inevitable. Caesar doesn't chase them immediately. He moves with a terrifying, calculated speed, securing the treasury and seizing control of the levers of power. He plays the role of the benevolent dictator, pardoning his enemies, showing a mercy that is as calculated as his violence. He wants to prove he is a better man than the ones who cast him out. But in the shadows, the knives are already being sharpened. The climactic collision happens at Pharsalus. It is a masterclass in tactical brutality. Pompey has the numbers, twice as many infantry and a cavalry force that should have crushed Caesar's lines in minutes. But Caesar is a gambler who has never lost. He hides a secret fourth line of infantry behind his own cavalry. When Pompey's horsemen charge, expecting an easy slaughter, they are met with a forest of steel javelins, not thrown, but held like pikes to the face. The shock is absolute. The cavalry breaks. The Roman world collapses into a chaotic, bloody swirl of panic and steel. Pompey flees to Egypt, hoping for sanctuary, only to be met by a king who believes a headless Roman general is the perfect gift for a conquering Caesar. When Caesar arrives in Egypt, he is handed a basket. Inside is the severed, shriveled head of his rival. He doesn't cheer. He weeps. This is the irony of the tyrant. He destroys the only men who were his equals, leaving himself surrounded only by those who are terrified of him. He is the master of the world, yet he has never been more alone. He returns to Rome in a series of triumphs, parading the wealth of nations through the streets. He is appointed dictator for life. He is a god in mortal skin. But the Senate doesn't look at him with adoration. They look at him with the cold, calculating eyes of predators, waiting for a lapse in focus. A group of conspirators forms in the dark. Men who owe him their lives, men who call him friend, and men who believe they are the saviors of a dead republic. They gather at the base of Pompey's statue, holding daggers beneath their togas. The date is the Ides of March, and the clock is ticking toward the final, blood-soaked betrayal. Section 3. The die is cast. The Rubicon was not a river. It was a death warrant. In January of 49 BC, Julius Caesar stood on the northern bank, the shallow water separating his province of Gaul from the sacred soil of Italy. To cross with an army was treason, punishable by immediate execution. The Roman Senate, led by the fearful Pompey the Great, had ordered him to disband his legions and return to Rome as a private citizen to face trial. They want to strip him of his command, his dignity, and ultimately his life. Caesar hesitated. According to Suetonius, he stared into the dark current and remarked, "Even now we may still draw back, but once we pass that little bridge, the whole issue is with the sword." He was a gambler who had spent his life betting on his own brilliance. With a sudden motion, he spurred his horse forward. Alia iacta est, asterisk, the die is cast, asterisk. He marched on Rome not as a conqueror of foreign lands, but as a predator stalking his own kin. The Senate panicked. Pompey, the man who had once been Caesar's ally and son-in-law, fled the city, abandoning the heart of the Republic to the man he had once mentored. Caesar entered Rome without a fight, bloodless, yet the psychological devastation was absolute. He walked through the gates not to destroy the city, but to seize its heartbeat. He did not stop to celebrate. He moved with a terrifying, kinetic speed. He chased Pompey across the Adriatic, through the rugged terrain of Greece, and finally to the plains of Pharsalus. It was here, in the summer of 48 BC, that the two titans of Rome collided. Pompey possessed the numbers, the prestige, and the support of the Senate's elite. Caesar possessed veterans who would follow him into the mouth of Hades. The heat was stifling. As the lines locked, the air filled with the screech of iron on iron, and the guttural roars of men who knew this was the end of the world as they knew it. Caesar's hidden fourth line of infantry, held in reserve, charged with spears leveled at the faces of Pompey's cavalry. The aristocratic horsemen, terrified of having their handsome faces scarred, broke in panic. The Republic crumbled in a single afternoon. Pompey fled to Egypt, seeking sanctuary, only to be met by a king who thought a severed head was the best gift for the victor. As Caesar arrived in Alexandria, he was presented with the trophy of his greatest rival. He turned away, weeping. But were these tears of grief, or the calculation of a man realizing his path to total power was now dangerously, irrevocably clear? Section 4. The Siren of the Nile, Alexandria, was a city of marble, gold, and intrigue, but for Caesar, it was a trap. He had arrived in pursuit of Pompey, only to find himself entangled in a vicious civil war between the young pharaoh Ptolemy Roman 13 and his exiled sister, Cleopatra Roman 7. Caesar was tired, outnumbered, and trapped within the palace walls. The city rose against him. He was forced to burn his own supply ships in the harbor to prevent them from falling into enemy hands. The fire jumped to the docks and consumed the great library of Alexandria, turning the collective knowledge of the ancient world into ash and smoke. Amidst this chaos, the legendary meeting occurred. Cleopatra, desperate to reclaim her throne, had herself smuggled into the palace, hidden inside a rug or a bed sack, unrolled at the feet of the Roman proconsul. She was not the ethereal beauty of later romanticized paintings, but a woman of razor-sharp intellect, linguistic mastery, and immense political magnetism. She spoke to Caesar not as a suppliant, but as a queen. Caesar was captivated. He saw in her the absolute power he had sought his entire life. For months, they remained in Alexandria, indulging in a luxury that scandalized the Roman Senate. They sailed the Nile in a royal barge, a decadent display of arrogance that made Caesar look less like a Roman general and more like an Eastern despot. When he finally left, he left behind a pregnant queen and a puppet kingdom, returning to Rome with the spoils of the East. He arrived home a guard. The Senate, now a hollow shell, bowed to his every whim. He was named Dictator Perpetuo Dictator for life. He reformed the calendar, stabilized the economy, and reorganized the provincial governments, acting with a frantic, obsessive efficiency. He knew the clock was ticking. He had enemies in every shadow, men who remembered the Republic when it was ruled by laws, not by one man's shadow. He walked through the Forum, his toga draped with effortless grace, ignoring the whispers behind the pillars. He held the power of life and death, but he failed to recognize the most dangerous weapon in Rome, the sharpened stylus of a friend. Among those who circled him was Marcus Brutus, a man Caesar had treated as a son, whose family history was rooted in the hatred of kings. Brutus watched Caesar from the back of the chamber, his face a mask of cold, unreadable resolve. The Ides of March were approaching, and the air in Rome grew heavy with the smell of iron and betrayal. Section 5. The Ides of March, March 50, 44 BC. The morning was bitter, with a strange, oppressive calm. Caesar was warned. His wife, Calpurnia, begged him not to go to the Senate, plagued by nightmares of his murder. A seer had warned him to beware the Ides of March. But Caesar was not a man who lived in fear. He dismissed the omens with a wave of his hand, confident in his own destiny, believing that the very men who had benefited from his mercy were his brothers in arms. He entered the theater of Pompey, where the Senate was meeting. As he took his seat, the conspirators crowded around him. They were not soldiers, they were senators, men of high birth, clutching daggers hidden in the folds of their robes. Tullius Cimber approached first, grabbing Caesar's toga and pulling it from his shoulders. The signal. The first blade struck his neck. Casca hit him from behind. Caesar fought back with the ferocity of a trapped lion, using his stylus to ward off his attackers, his eyes scanning the blur of faces until they landed on Brutus. The sight of his protege, blade in hand, seemed to shatter his spirit. The resistance drained from him. He covered his face with his toga, resigned, allowing the tide of steel to wash over him. 23 stabs. He collapsed at the base of a statue of his old rival, Pompey. The irony was absolute. The conspirators stood over the bleeding corpse, expecting the people to cheer for the restoration of the Republic. They held their bloodied knives aloft and shouted, "Liberty!" But the streets remained deathly silent. The people did not rise. They were stunned. The vacuum of power left by Caesar's death did not return Rome to the old ways. It hurled it into a new, darker era of civil war that would eventually bury the Republic forever. As the conspirators fled, the body of the dictator lay abandoned on the cold stone floor. His attendants eventually carried him away, but his ghost remained in the halls of power. Rome had killed its master, but in doing so, it had killed its own soul. The tragedy was not that Caesar died. It was that the Roman Republic died with him, replaced by an empire that would span the globe, built on the blood of the man who had dared to think he was bigger than Rome. Conclusion: Julius Caesar was the last breath of a dying republic and the first heartbeat of an empire. He proved that a single man, armed with enough brilliance and enough cruelty, could bend the arc of history to his own will. He changed the calendar by which we measure our days, the language of our law, and the very concept of absolute power. When he fell, he left behind a world that could no longer govern itself, setting the stage for the rise of emperors and the long, slow decline of the Western world. He remains the ultimate cautionary tale, the man who saved the state by destroying its freedom. The shadow of his toga still stretches across every government, a reminder that the greatest threats to democracy often arrive not with a shout, but with a smile and a promise to restore order. Outro, if this story moved you, subscribe to Chronicles of History. New documentary every week. Drop a comment. What moment shocked you most? The next video is on screen right now.